Welcome to Hark, the 87th Precinct podcast. We're back looking at Killer's Wedge by Ed McBain from 1959. We've got 3 years into his 87th Precinct series. Finally got into 1959. And we are moving on to another new style of book, I think, really, this one here. I am joined, as usual, by Mr. Stephen Royston and Mr. Morgan Brown.
Good evening.
Hello there.
And we've all just watched the TV series episode Lady in Waiting, which is based on this, so we'll probably talk about that as well. But we'll kick off, as we've moved into a new year, I do like to look back to the days of yore. And we'll go back to 1959. So this book was registered for copyright in January of 1959. He released 3 87th Precinct novels in 1959, so it was a busy year. In fact, he published 6 books in total, 3 87th Precinct ones and 3 other ones. So he was a bit of a busy writer about this time. Let's have a little look at we like to look at the music. I won't make you guess this time because I can't wait to get round to it. The number one in the UK around 1959, January 1959, was It's Only Make Believe by Conway Twitty.
Marvellous.
But even better was number 2 was Hootsmon by Lord Rockingham's 11, which is known to a whole generation of people through, I think, being on an advert once, wasn't it?
Absolutely,
for fruit pastels or something like that.
Well, what's that?
Maynard's Wine Gums, if I'm not mistaken.
Was that the...
There's a moose loose about this hoose.
It's the one. Yeah, the halcyon days of early British rock.
Yeah, that's what we were all listening to. But even better, in America at this time, the number 1 song was The Chipmunk Song by the Chipmunks.
Excellent.
Or Dave Seville and the Chipmunks, to be more accurate.
The rodent invasion.
Yeah. It was a Christmas song, the original Chipmunk song, and it was still in the charts at number 1 into January of the next year. And so it was ahead of Smoke Gets in Your Eyes by the Platters, which I think people has got a bit more of a legacy, really. Although, did the Platters ever have a series of animated cartoons and a spin-off series of films?
Not that I'm aware of yet.
No, well, they should have. Where every episode ends with them going, "Oh, I can't see anything! There's all this smoke!" That's what happens, you see. And that's why...
I'm sure it's in,
Hollywood don't return my calls.
Pre-production somewhere.
Anyway, the best picture of 1959, I think I said this was last year's, 1958's, which was Gigi.
Oh, yes.
But 1958's one was The Bridge on the River Kwai. And in the UK, some of the films that were out were The Hound of the Baskervilles, the version with Peter Cushing and Andre Morel.
Yep. And Christopher Lee's in that. Doesn't he play Sir Henry Baskerville?
He does play Sir Henry Baskerville. Andre Morel was in some of the Quatermass TV series. He's very good. Best Quatermass. Also out was Our Man in Havana, which is a very good adaptation of the Graham Greene book. The film version of the radio series The Navy Lark, which starred no one from the Navy Lark radio series except Leslie Phillips.
I never knew they made a film of that.
Yeah, it's not very well thought of. And Espresso Bongo, which is
excellent.
An early sort of pop film, isn't it? It's
Cliff and the Shads.
Yeah, it's a bit of a dafty. 1959.
The Shads.
Shads.
Yeah, to me, they're the Shads. Yeah. To you, they may be the Shadows.
And some notable births from January 1959. Susanna Hoffs. Sade. And Vic Reeves.
Oh.
So
good year.
Yeah, classic lineup. Obviously, things that happened in 1959 early in the year were, sadly, the plane crash that killed Buddy Holly, Richie Valens, Big Bopper and their pilot. But we're not going to dwell on the death of much-loved music performers and the Big Bopper.
Oh,
that's silly, because I like the Big Bopper as well.
Of course.
Yeah. So, we're getting on to Killer's Wedge, 1959. Now, we've got a bit of a publishing background thing going on here, because up to now, these have really just been paperbacks that have come out in pocket books by Perma Books, a division of Simon & Schuster. With Killer's Wedge, this is the first one that gets a hardback copy. So there's a hardback version. It's published as an Inner Sanctum Mystery. So a range of books called an Inner Sanctum Mystery. Still just an 87 Precinct book, but that's clearly what they were calling their hardcover mystery editions at the time.
Oh, okay.
The cover of the book doesn't even have the words 87th Precinct on it, and it seems to be quite rare, but that's no surprise really. So yeah, it's...
So almost standalone when it came out then?
Yeah, I think so. Presumably by this point the series has started to really make an impact, and it's been big enough and popular enough that they feel like they can invest into a hardback edition, because it's going to cost them more to produce, which is going to bring them in more money, isn't it?
But they anticipate they get a greater readership.
They're still
public libraries with hardbacks.
I guess so.
Libraries.
So
I suspect
something with a bit more longevity and not something that's just like an ephemeral kind of throwaway paperback, which is it's nice. They're starting to think of it like that. I guess.
Yeah, I mean, there's a paperback edition as well, still in Perma books, but it's an interesting point that it happens with this book, because I think again, and we seem to be saying it quite a lot, but I think that's the nature of an early series of books. Is almost every time we're getting something new, or a change in style, or a change in the possibilities of what the author can do, and this is a real area where this book stands out, I think. Other interesting background about this, I was trying to find some contemporary research, see if I could find any reviews and things like that. From the New York Times in 1958, from August 1958, I found the line. It was all about the books that he'd had out up to that point. It said, Mr. Hunter now is reworking the yet unpublished Killer's Wedge into a play for Broadway.
Oh, right.
Although it misspells Broadway as Boradway.
Boradway.
So it's interesting that he clearly felt something about this story, because I also found that he repeatedly tried over the years to try and do stage play versions of it. About 40 times, apparently. He tried to adapt this into a stage play, and actually thinking about it, it could make a very good stage play, or the A plot of it certainly could be. He apparently was encouraged to do it by a composer, songwriter called Jules Stein, who was a British American, who'd worked with Frank Sinatra, Sammy Cahn, people like that, and was the writer of the music for Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, Mr. Magoo's Christmas Carol, Funny Girl, wrote Let It Snow, Let It Snow, Let It Snow, 3 Coins in the Fountain, The Party's Over, things like that.
Tremendous.
And he apparently encouraged Evan Hunter to try and adapt this into a play, or possibly a musical even. I don't know.
That would have been fun, wouldn't it?
It would have certainly been interesting.
What rhymes with nitroglycerin?
Yeah, good dance numbers in this, I can imagine.
Yeah, well, it certainly reads like a play. Yeah, without even knowing all that, I kind of assumed it was some kind of desire to write a kind of a like a don't know what's the word I'm looking for.
Well, you think it's like chamber piece.
Yeah,
small contained.
Chamber piece is exactly what I was after. Yeah, definitely, because it stands out so differently to the earlier books. So that comes as no surprise at all, actually.
No, it would be very interesting to read it almost as a script. But we have just watched the TV adaptation of it from the 87th Precinct series in the early 60s, which Evan Hunter, Ed McBain adapted himself. And did a pretty good job of that, I think.
The most faithful to the book, I would say, than perhaps is no coincidence.
No, very
the
true.
Previous ones we watched.
Although I still don't understand why they changed characters' names for no reason.
Seems odd.
We've had this discussion before, but it's just some very, very odd ones. But we don't need to go over that particularly. Anyway, the book is dedicated to Helen and Jean. Have your copies both got this dedication in, just as literally the words for Helen and Jean?
Helen and Jean.
Yep.
Okay, so I found out who they were anyway.
Jean Simmons and Helen Shapiro.
Jean Simmons, together at last. Their new duets album. That would be wonderful.
Who were they?
It was Jean Federico, who was an advertising director, graphic designer and photographer, and had taken pictures of Evan Hunter for dust jackets for hardcovers editions of his books, because the paperbacks didn't really carry pictures like that. And his wife was also a graphic designer who was an author of children's books and worked on cookery books and things like that. So that's who those people are. It's always interesting to find out a little bit about the world and the people I don't know, maybe you didn't like them. Here's a really grim story about someone's death.
Excellent.
So there's a little bit of background on it anyway. We're not overloaded with loads of locations in this book, are we? We've got only a couple.
I think it comes as streamlined and slimmed down as they come, really. These
definitely.
Just two. You see, you could definitely do the entire book as a theatre production.
A single set, really, yeah.
Yeah, you would just... there's essentially two rooms in the entire book. You've got one set in the squad room, of which the main thrust of the story is, and then like the side plot is set in this creepy old house that seems inconceivable is still standing in the city, where Carella's investigating this murder in a bit of a locked room mystery, and so you would just pretty much need that as well. So,
I think if they adapted it for a play, though, I think they'd jettison that plot like they did in the TV series.
Well, possibly, yeah, but you could still have it up and...
creative staging, you could do it quite easily, I think, probably.
Even almost have, like, the Carell scenes as almost a front of curtain thing, really. It'd be doable.
Yes, definitely. It opens in the squad room, and we're set in October, on a hot October day. It's a normal everyday afternoon at the beginning of October. That's the first line of the book.
Probably the most conspicuously unspectacular first line of a book you could imagine.
Yes, it is. But that's great because the end of chapter 1 ends immediately on a massive cliffhanger. Yeah. So you only have it is a bit like the fade in at the start of an episode of the TV series, and then the pre-credits. Chapter 2 should just say credits sequence. Yeah, a hot day in October this is set. We're recording this at the height of the English summer, and you can tell because it is absolutely pouring down with rain, typically. But it opens on a great squad room scene where the cops are sitting around having a bit of usual laddish banter.
Some bants.
Yeah, some bants going around. Oh, bants. I like the idea as well that the sound of the squad room is a well-constructed symphony, a 3-part harmony built on telephone rings, typewriter clackings, and profanities. So typing and swearing. I wonder if one's related to the other.
Some good variations there too.
Yes, the splendid whooshy sound of a bull's fist crashing into a thief's belly. So clearly the institutional violence is still expected and commonplace here. Yeah. And an angry detective shouting about where the hell his ballpoint pen's gone. But it starts out like that as, very much he's saying this is just a day, a typical day. This is what it's like in a squad room. This is how it sounds. This is how people act. Into which our protagonist, is that the word? Antagonist. That's the word I'm looking for, isn't it? Our antagonist turns up and she looks for a moment like death personified.
Bum, bum, bum.
Bum, bum, bum. Indeed. The detective stared at her. Her hand slipped into the pocket on the right-hand side of her coat. When it emerged, it was holding something cold and hard. What could it be?
A spoon.
Lump of coal. It was a .38 revolver. I assume it's a revolver. Is it? I don't know. Gun. Let's just say gun.
38.
Yeah. And so the amazing thing about this book is that this woman starts to hold up an entire squad room in a very busy police station, and he goes into specifics about how many people are there later in the book because she demands to know. But she manages with one gun at this point to take the detectives division hostage.
Yep.
So that's, she's determined. Let's put it that way. And she's obviously, it turns out, after Steve Carell. And they all like Steve Carell because he's the best. So they're obviously a bit concerned. But what McBain's done is cleverly, as we've mentioned there, given him a plot of his own to be dealing with to keep him out of
some dusty old house.
Out of the squad room.
With some deranged family.
Yeah, so he's investigating what appears to be a suicide, so they're required by law to investigate a suicide. But he gets there and he clearly gets the instinct that something's not quite right.
It's a bit of a hunch, doesn't he? It's, But it's a bit of a lock, as I said before, a bit of a locked room mystery because the room was locked from the inside, wasn't it? And the guy was strung up, and he'd seemingly hung himself, but tied the rope to the door handle, so it was totally impossible that anybody could have done this crime.
It's quite a sort of throwback to an earlier age of mystery novels, really. And
he mentions...
I was looking for it because I've forgotten the name that he refers to.
John Dickson Carr.
That's the guy.
Yeah.
So who's this John Dickson Carr?
He was a crime writer that specialised in locked room mysteries.
Particularly, yeah. Like an American writer, I think, but wrote about, mainly in British settings, influenced by Chesterton and...
In, like, dusty old houses, just like
very
that.
much kind of wealthy families with lots of little intrigues between them.
Are we sort of talking a contemporary of Agatha Christie type?
I think so, yeah. I've read one of them, and I honestly can't... I think it involves this guy... I think they're a bit of a supernatural element to some of them. Or certainly the one I read, I think, had a bit of a... You were a bit like Hand of the Baskervilles. You weren't quite...
Yeah.
Obviously, I think...
Sounds like you're describing...
You know, but obviously it was... Yeah, I can't quite remember.
Dr. Gideon Fell? Is that one of his main detectives? And there's another one as well, but I've forgotten.
Yeah, that's right. Oh, crikey, yeah. I'm trying to wrap my brains together. But yeah, there was some guy who'd been haunted almost by this person who he knows to be dead or something, and then he dies in this room, and it's totally impossible that anybody could have ever got in.
It sounds like...
Explains at great length how, well, similar to this, how, you just need to, like, tweak a couple of facts.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they always...
Like Jonathan Creek.
Yeah, well, exactly, yeah. Was he stabbed by an icicle that then evaporated, and, all those kind of shenanigans.
Well, certainly by this stage, that's a well-known and dusty enough trope for this to be a very kind of knowing nod, isn't it, I think?
Yeah, but McBain does kind of mention him in here, because he says, he's felt like something that...
Doesn't Corella say, what do we do now, Cole?
John Dickson Carr, yeah. I think it's John Dickson Carr.
Yeah, I think it's... McBain always wears his influences on his sleeve. He always makes a reference when he does something that appears to be ripped off from or is clearly in the tradition or influenced by stuff, such as constantly referring to Dragnet. There's even a little throwaway Dragnet line in this. I think most of the books we've read so far somewhere have a reference to the police work either being like something off Dragnet or being completely not like something off Dragnet.
It must be the 30s here. The Hollow Man, is that the one I read? I shall investigate.
You investigate. So, we've got a squad room held up by Mrs. Virginia Dodge. Oh, I'm getting a nod from Steve.
Yes, it definitely was the Hollow Man, and according to the internet, his masterpiece, and I do have to... 1935.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah, this is it. The illusionist Pierre Flay claims to have murdered... Yeah, but people can rise from their graves and walk through walls. There you go. I knew there was
sounds interesting. I'd like to read that.
Yeah, I knew there was a certain supernatural element to it.
Supernatural elephant.
Yeah. Yes, anyway, there he is. Yeah, so that Agatha Christie kind of...
Yeah, so that interwar period type of thing. Yeah, so we've got Virginia Dodge, who is our antagonist in the squad room, holding up some of the detectives, and the lieutenant... Lieutenant Burns.
Yep. Bullet-headed Pete Burns.
Who features very heavily in this book.
He does, yeah.
And not at all in the TV adaptation. His role's given over to Maya Meyer. I don't think he's appeared in that. I've seen him twice. 2 episodes I've seen of him.
Yeah, he comes out of his room in one of them, doesn't he?
Yeah.
So it's a bit strange how they don't bother.
Yeah, and then Corella's off on this to-do. Corella's gone there after finding out that... or confirming that Teddy is pregnant. So Teddy Corella, his wife, is now pregnant. So there's more jeopardy in there in that we know that, and Corella's keen to get his job sorted out, but he's being a good cop as he is. He can't quite just walk away going, it was a suicide. Something's, his instincts are kicking in, and he's hanging around there. And as the book goes on, all of the detectives who are on shift, save Corella, end up back in the squad room, and have to be dealt with by Mrs. Frank Dodge, Virginia Dodge, who has got a bottle of soup. Nitroglycerine. And we don't know all the way through the book whether it's actually a bottle of nitro or just a bottle of tap water.
Or soup.
Or very, very clear soup.
Might be consommé.
Yes, well, actually this...
And what's his name on MasterChef always says the clearest consommé is the best, doesn't he?
Well, yeah, especially
Michel Roux Jr.
Famed nitroglycerine inspector Michel Roux Jr. But this has been adapted several times, actually. Killer's Wedge, obviously, Lady
telly.
Yeah, well, different things. Lady in Waiting was the telly one we watched.
Yeah.
There is a French film in 1963 called La Soupe au Poulet, which is chicken soup.
Nice.
So that's where soup comes from. There was a thing called Theatre of Stars, Deadlock, in 1967. I don't know what that was.
Gosh.
And a Japanese version called Satsui in 2005. I think there's quite a few adaptations in Japan of things. It's quite hard to find the information out on the internet because as soon as you start looking for anything Japanese, you end up with loads of Japanese websites. And I don't read or speak Japanese. So it's obviously a popular one to adapt. Yes, one of it's called Chicken Soup in French. I'd like to find that one. I'd be interested to see what that was like. But it's great. It's such a tense story because he manages to do what... It's almost completely unbelievable that one woman could walk into a police station and capture everyone, given how many guns there are knocking about.
Yeah, but although the basic situation is fairly implausible, I think he actually explains the psychology behind it well enough that it seems completely credible while it's actually happening.
Yeah.
You totally understand why no one has actually stepped in to stop the situation. And the way he gets inside the different characters' thought processes is one of the things that makes it really compelling. Whereas normally your interest is driven by the actual procedure of people going out and doing these different bits of police work, and it's action and there's a lot of stuff going on. This is mainly just some people standing around in a room with this simmering tension.
Yeah.
And it's every bit as compelling, if not more so, than any of the books in the series so far.
Yeah, and all these detectives keep coming back in and having to deal with the situation, and you get to see their thought processes played out, and you get to see them in little chunks as the chapters go by, as they speculate, as they get more frustrated, as things become more difficult, as more people turn up.
Quite like they've all got their little schemes of how they think they're going to get out of it. With Mayor posting his little messages that he's sent, and then the story of the people who've picking this up in the outside world.
Yeah.
There's a pair of drunks, aren't there, who get the group of lads who are all drunk and they don't really know what to do with it. And
they're a little bit more concerned with going off and trying to find some prostitutes, I seem to recall.
And then somebody just picks it up, don't they, and thinks it's just a hoax and throws it away immediately. And then there's the...
there's someone who doesn't speak or read English, picks it up and doesn't understand it and bins it. There's the three lads who are college students, university students, who are on the booze and decide to go off and try and find some prostitutes. And they are really horrible characters.
They are. They provide a bit of comic relief, but they're quite
their comic relief starts with them discussing assaulting their teacher.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Which is an interesting throwback to Blackboard Jungle. Now I've just thought of that because that does actually happen in Blackboard Jungle. But, yeah, it's played... Oh, they're seedy little
They're vile, aren't they, yeah.
And they're really preppy and a bit sort of like... You can tell if you were in the bar next to them, they would not be nice people to stand next to at the bar.
You kind of get the impression that the author's not particularly fond of that type of character, and he's taking great pleasure in lampooning a certain type of preppy youngster who he's probably encountered in his daily life.
But at least one of them does the right thing, and when he finds the note, goes off to ring up headquarters, who singularly fail to pick up on the cues that they're given from the 87th squad when they ring up to say, is this a crank type thing? And in fact that happens throughout the way they try to communicate. So when the desk sergeant Dave Murchison comes up and Lieutenant Peter Burns ends his chat with him with the word forthwith, and it just completely baffles him. But that's because he's trying to get across the message that something's not right. Forthwith means report immediately. Poor old Dave doesn't have a clue what's going on.
There's a good dialogue between... I always love when Captain Frick's involved, because he's like totally incompetent.
He's totally feckless, yeah.
And he fails to get the hints.
Pick up all the cues.
There's something not quite right.
Because essentially what Pete Burns says on the phone to Captain Frick is, "Why don't you come up to the squad room and see what's happening?" And Captain Frick's just like, "Bah, bah, 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 bah."
What do you mean, Pete?
Behind his desk. He was called Captain Howard in the TV episode, wasn't he, for some reason?
Oh, yeah, so he
And
was.
had a huge nameplate on his desk.
Just in case you weren't sure.
Flipping, hedge.
Size of a hedge. The universal size measurement for nameplates. But at least Dave Murchison gets to go back to his desk and ponder on it. Captain Frick doesn't get into any danger, although he would be if the...
Does he even go upstairs, Murchison, in the book? I can't
He
remember.
He does probably at one point, yeah.
Is that when he hears the gunshot like he did in the TV?
Yeah.
Yes.
So, because the gun is discharged, and the very poor person who receives the gunshot wound in this story is poor old clerical patrolman Alf Miscolo, or Miscolo.
Serves him right for all that terrible coffee he's made
Well,
will make in future years.
Yes, this is
It doesn't make his coffee any better, certainly.
We will be talking about Miscolo's coffee-making adventures and misfortunes in the next book.
I don't think he's been in that many.
No, he hasn't by this point, but he does feature a bit more with his cheery call of "yo" every time he's called.
Yeah, he generally kind of crops up after this, I think, doesn't he?
But he has quite a dramatic role in this book, because he comes into the room, tries to run out, but is shot. And we end up later in the story with a really quite vivid... We look into sort of... He's having a flashback while he's injured and he's near to death. And he's having a flashback to a girl he loved before the war and his time in the war. And... It's quite dramatic and it's quite heartbreaking, really.
It is, yeah.
And despite that, the weird thing is it reminded me of a sequence in the first 4 Transformers comics. It sounds like a daft thing to say. In the first 4 Transformers comics, you have the human characters. Sparkplug Witwicky, his son Buster. Sparkplug is held captive by the Decepticons and forced to make them new fuel. But at one point, he has a heart attack and gets knocked out, and he has a war flashback. Like,
is it human?
Sparkplug Witwicky, yeah.
All right.
And it was really weird because I remember reading that comic and it's like, oh, robots, and in fact Spider-Man in some of it as well. And then suddenly there's this really dramatic bit where the human character's having a flashback to the Korean War, and it's or Vietnam or something at the time. I can't remember which one it is, and it's just reminded me. Miscolo's sort of feverish dreams sort of reminds me of that. It's a strange comparison to make, but I've made it so that I love Transformers. Poor old Miscolo.
Yeah, he doesn't. He gets a really raw deal in this one. Absolutely.
Comes across even worse in the television episode, but just kind of leave him.
Yeah, you don't ever find out what happened.
Which they kind of do in the book as well, but it's kind of less apparent when you...
They do try and look after him, but where possible, don't they? But, yeah.
As if things couldn't get any worse, Teddy Corella decides to surprise Steve by meeting him at the squad room.
Oh.
So turns up there before Steve Corella does, walks straight into this. And despite Pete Burns' very clever attempts to communicate to her that she needs to pretend to be someone else, we do find out, because apparently newspapers, in reporting on crimes in the 87th Precinct world, will do things like saying, Detective Steve Corella arrested Frank Dodge for hold up at a gas station or whatever it is. Detective Steve Corella, whose deaf-mute wife, Teddy...
Yeah, it's fairly preposterous, that, I thought.
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe it was... I don't yeah.
Well, they might have done little profiles, I suppose, of notable detectives, who knows.
Was I reading the newspaper in a fictional city in 1959? I was not.
No.
I could not say. Lots of lovely little bits of detail here as well, and these few extra characters that you get coming across. One of the people who finds one of Maya's notes is a publisher called Jeffrey Tamblyn, and he gets about 3 or 4 paragraphs to himself where it just talks about how he hates publishing maths books.
I'd forgotten about that. It's really unusual, isn't it? Because he goes into great depth, this guy's hatred for his own profession and like what he's been really successful at.
He just wants to publish slim volumes of poetry, but instead he's forced to do things about algebra.
He hates maths. And
he's there and he's gone because he just uses the note to wipe some gum off his shoes.
Is he the guy who just thinks it's nonsense?
He doesn't even read it. He just uses it to scrape off his boot.
Yeah, it's
really
nice
weird.
that he uses those notes as a way of just painting these little character sketches, and then so there's a bit of kind of colour to break the tension of this very claustrophobic environment that he's created in the novel.
Yeah,
he's very good at that in all the books, isn't he? And we talked about in the past, less apparent in this because obviously it's set primarily in, exclusive in these 2 locations. But you never know when you're about to go off on a bit of a tangent, do you? It's when you've got these wacky characters introduced, you never know whether they're going to prove critical or they're critically important or not. He's not whatsoever.
One other major character who we haven't mentioned, I will come to in a second, who is brought into the situation by, is it Hal Willis, who brings in a prisoner?
Oh, yeah.
But in Chapter 3, we get a lovely description of lots of details about the city itself and the amount of people. I think we mentioned this in the last podcast, didn't we?
Yeah, there was quite a lot in the last one, yeah.
There were 90,000 people living in the 87th Precinct, and he goes into a very detailed description about the roads around it. So he's got a very clear idea in his mind about the layout of this city. We talked about maps and stuff in the last
It's
podcast.
inconceivable he would have done this without a map, having sketched something out.
I reckon by this point, because he names so many of the streets.
Because how on earth would he keep a track of what's north of where and what's east of where? You
You'd
just
start
would not
contradicting yourself very soon, wouldn't you? I'd imagine.
Would not be able to do it at all.
Yeah.
So there must have been an Evan Hunter map. Would be interesting.
God, that'd be the holy grail. An Ed McBain hand-drawn map of the 87th Precinct or Isola. That would be amazing. But it gives him a chance to also talk about the immigration pattern of America and of the city itself, so that he can again paint the picture of this multicultural space,
which is an ongoing theme throughout the rest of the 40 books to come, or however many.
Yeah, and there's a great little section where I was reading this through again just before we started and looking at it, and it's like, oh yeah, he does that thing where he compares mice and rats to the Nazis, setting traps for the mice and rats which paraded through the apartment like the Wehrmacht through Poland.
Yeah.
Nazi mice. That then leads into a very detailed description about how many policemen are on duty at any one time. But the reason I mentioned that about the ethnic population and the makeup of the city is because the Puerto Ricans are a large part of it. First generation at this point, really, Puerto Ricans. And the person who gets brought into the midst of all of this madness in the squad room is Angelica Gomez. I'm pronouncing Angelica because that's how they pronounce it on the TV series. But Angelica Gomez, who has slit someone's throat, quite rightly, it sort of seems. She's sort of been assaulted, or someone's made a very, vigorous hands-on play for her.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I think I've forgotten which member of the squad it is who's actually interviewing her, but it seems to be kind of, someone should make a pass at you, but from what she's saying, it sounds very much like someone pretty much sexually assaulted her.
Yeah.
So she slits her throat, which, certainly, it's fairly extreme, but you can't blame her that much, can you?
No, but it gives McBain a chance to muse on the nature of what it's like to be an immigrant in a city.
Definitely, yeah.
And it's quite poetic and sad when she's talking about what life was like on the island of Puerto Rico compared to what it's like in the city.
It really is. She's for a character who could have just been kind of a very throwaway stereotype. She's actually given a lot of dignity, I think, and she's portrayed with a lot more sympathy than I think some other writers probably would have at the time.
Kind of spent all her money getting to the States, and now can't afford to go
Yeah.
go home, and
And she's
Probably
been
a fairly
forced to
common-
some extent into prostitution, but she's got a lot of dignity, and talks about how the language barrier can make you appear to be less
intelligent
than you actually are, and that's a contemporary issue now as much as anything, really.
I would say so,
Yeah.
absolutely.
But she's dragged into the midst of this stuff, and she foolishly picks a side when an event happens, when they try and disarm Virginia Dodge, and pays for it by getting basically knocked unconscious by Virginia Dodge, who has also pistol whipped Maya really vigorously, shot Alf Miskolo, and Hawes is hit as well, isn't he? He's smashed across the face by Virginia Dodge. So she gives them all, some good beatings in there. She's not exactly hinged.
No. She's a fairly formidable opponent for them as well. Yeah, definitely. They're not someone to be taken lightly at all. Yeah.
Tell you what is hinged: the door in the Scott mansion that Corella is investigating.
Oh, that's certainly hinged.
It's hinged and it opens outwards into a corridor, which just annoys me no end as an idea.
Much hinges upon it.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's
He's definitely he's trying to work out how this locked room mystery happened, and it's because this body of this man who supposedly hung himself is being weighted against a door that opens into the corridor. So his sons say, "Oh, we couldn't open the door. We had to crowbar it to get the lock off," and all this sort of stuff. And
Which it did.
And then the funny thing is, this book's called Killer's Wedge, and it comes in two terms. As actually a physical wedge in one of the stories is the key to it. Sorry if you've not read it. That's our spoiler policy of having no spoiler policy.
Well, with the door in the house, great play is made by those three brothers, isn't there, trying to open the door, and they all testify to the fact that they could not physically open the door, try as they might. And two of them have been, they're all being very, very genuine about that is absolutely true.
Yes.
So, yeah.
But
that one out.
There's wedges involved in the real sense of the word, and then there's also the conceptual wedge that Virginia Dodge forces between Peter Burns and his men. He can't really do anything to command them in the situation.
World, I suppose.
And the outside world. So there's wedges all over the place.
Yeah.
It's almost like he thought about the title.
Might have been a bit different. Killer's Wedgie.
That would be just talk about insult to injury.
Somebody
You
who
don't
goes
kill someone and
around
then pulls up their
killing-
pants.
Murdering people and then giving a big wedgie.
Oh.
Or kills them via the wedgie.
Oh, blimey, that would take some strong arms.
Yeah.
It's not bad thinking about, really.
Yeah. Could be a totally different. They won't be making theatre productions of that anyway.
Yeah, they'll be making Disney kids TV show versions of it. Oh, my voice went funny then.
Well, so yeah. But there's probably less to be said about the sides, because that's quite with all these locked room mysteries. Yeah, as soon as you get an inkling of what happens, then kind of totally ruins it. So.
Yeah, well, we'll not
So
go
I'll say
too
less
deeply
about
into
that.
it, but it's obviously meant to be very much a side.
Oh,
plot,
it is,
really.
yeah,
It's your standard kind of family with loads of little bitter intrigues and infighting that emerge with a little bit of prodding, as always happens in these circumstances.
Yeah, most of them neurotic and got an axe to grind.
Of course, yeah.
Being forced into the family business.
Definitely, yeah.
Stuff like that. But actually, as Corella leaves that scene, when he's figured it out, at least he gets to have a good fight sequence, proper dramatic fight sequence, which he gets hit with a rake, he's rolling over fires, all sorts of stuff in someone's garden. It's a nice dramatic story for him as much as anything.
There's a butler as well, isn't there?
Oh, he makes a point of, I think, that the narrator who points out that the butler never did it.
Yeah.
I think there's at least one old paperback edition that does. The cover is Corella looking down at something, some burning piece of wood while someone wields a rake at the back of his head.
Oh yes, I think I've seen that cover as well.
Which, it is a good image, although possibly misses the main point of the book.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm quite pleased that the butler's called Roger. Roger the butler. Must I?
Yeah. Good old Rog.
Oh dear. Oh, I just opened the book on the phrase firm, fleshy calves.
Marvellous.
Ooh, Roger the butler.
Yeah. Well, you have
He's
to
wearing his shorts when he answered the door.
Can you imagine? The Scots were eccentric. All their staff wore shorts all year round.
It was the hottest October day on record. Roger the butler was wearing shorts to reveal his... ... No, he said it. His fleshy...
His fleshy...
Firm, fleshy calves.
I assume that was probably actually in reference to our old mate Angelica. Cotton, I seem to recall, spends quite a lot of time with his mind wandering off to appreciate her firm, fleshy calves while he's pondering what course of action to take next.
Yes, indeed. I mean, she's clearly, hesitate to use the phrase, but a sight to behold. She's clearly, dramatically beautiful and sort of exotic to them, which for Cotton Hawes is always like...
Yes.
It's in his wheelhouse. However, of course, in the book before this, he has met someone, so he doesn't go mad for it.
He doesn't. Thankfully.
Although she does try to use her charms to get out of the situation a little bit.
Does.
But I think she figures she's really not going to win that way. So it's fantastic. It's a fantastic story, this one. It's tense. It's what's the word I'm looking for? I can't think of the word. Well, you don't like being in small spaces.
Claustrophobic.
Claustrophobic! That just totally went out of my head. It is a claustrophobic story because you're trapped in there with them, especially when they start doing things like messing around with the air conditioning, closing the windows to try and heat up the room. So you're actually in there. You've got characters like Angelica who is comfortable with the heat, starts thinking about Puerto Rico. The rest of them start thinking about, why is it so hot? What's happening here? And you're getting that with them because it's happening quite quickly. You've got Paul Miscolo in this 90-degree room, burning up from being shot. And it's very claustrophobic. The Scott Mansion in its own way is a bit claustrophobic because all the people who live there sort of trapped there as well.
Yeah, they're kind of prisoners of
prisoners of
parallel.
I think
prisoners of that house to a certain extent.
Probably is a deliberate parallel between the two situations that have occurred in this enclosed space.
Yeah,
it definitely is like the traditional locked room mystery, and then this sort of like very modern kind of police kind of situation that's occurring in an urban setting. It's
Excellent. Okay, so I think we're going to move on to our judgments and ratings for this any second now. And I'm not going to recall the rest of the stories as we normally do when I read out the scores because I want us to go into this without reference to other things. We want to just go into it in and of itself. It's amazing that we're only on the 8th book of this series. It already feels a long way on from Cop Hater, but not too distant that it becomes completely unfamiliar, really. So, I don't know, who should I go to first to ask for a police shields out of 100 for this? I think I'll go over to you, Steve-O, for your summing up.
Yeah, my summing up, I do very much like it. However, watching the television programme reminded me, I do find it just slightly too ridiculous in that... I'm sure they could have overcome it, even taking a bit of a leap of faith on the plot. It just seems a bit too unbelievable. That said, I think it's very well done, and I do like having all the squad together. And I do like the locked room mystery element also. So I shall go 71.
71. Ooh. Right. Okay. 71. Right, and I'm going to Morgan next. I think I went first last time.
I do take on board your suggestion that maybe you can't quite believe the situation, but whilst I don't think, I think in the TV version you do wonder if maybe there are times when they could have overcome Virginia. I think in the novel, I feel like McBain very skillfully kind of explains at every point why it just seems a bit too much of a leap. And then when a character does finally feel like they're able to take that leap, it's like, even at the end, you kind of wonder if that was necessarily the wisest decision. So it's always a tightrope that they're walking, and I understand completely why that situation continues. So to me, it seems credible, even though it's like fairly far-fetched.
Yeah.
So I think it's tremendous. It's a bold leap forward. I like the even more compressed time frame than the last book, which had this kind of fairly strict countdown. This one's even more compressed. It's really tense.
It must be like an hour long, this book, something like that.
It's up to a few hours, isn't it?
I think it's a little bit longer than that.
Like
but
3 hours or something of an afternoon, something like that. I should have checked.
Not very long.
There's actually something about that someone mentioned the time that the family are having dinner, and so I could have checked on that. But
it's an absolutely cracking novel. I'm gonna go in with a strong 87 police badges.
87.
Oh, 87 in the 87.
That should be the top score, really.
Make the system any more complicated than it.
Let's not change it now.
Well, I am more towards Morgan's view of it, that I think it is very well explained. They do feel that they can't risk, and he uses Cotton Horse to say, I come from the 30th precinct, which is very posh and quite, well-to-do, doesn't have any of this madness going on. But he says about the 87th precinct was the concept of fairness. And that sort of underlines it. They don't want to do anything that risks anyone. So that's at the fundamental base of this.
I think I've I think one thing that I could never get my head round is what they thought they were really going to achieve by just all sitting there in great danger, waiting for the person that she's already told them she's going to kill. That's kind of...
Well, they have their various schemes, don't they? So they're all trying to...
Well, they don't initially, though. Certainly. I don't know,
Well,
they sit around for a while before they get those.
Well, they do know they've got a while before Carell's coming back, so they've actually got a little bit of time to play with. They try and think of a way out of the situation.
Most of those are thwarted. I don't know. Yeah, I think it was kind of that as well, that they're like, well, if they didn't know what on earth she was up to, then they'd be like, maybe more. I don't know.
Detective Royston would have been right in there.
He would, yeah.
Detective Royston, would you have done what? The only thing that I think you could have done, which is when she gets this point 38 revolver out and says, "Give me your guns," you just shoot her anyway.
Yeah. I'm not gonna.
Well, yeah.
Mind you, nitroglycerine that you didn't know about, you might have ended up blowing up the entire...
of course.
I'd lock her in a room and stab her with an icicle. And then make John Dickson Carr work out who did it.
Fair enough. Well, I like very much, perhaps, obviously there's always they could have done this, they could have done that.
No, they could, of course, but
I think it's very well written. I think it's phenomenally written. It's phenomenally packed with character, thought, process, detail.
It definitely is,
so for that reason, I'm going in for 88 of your police shields, which gives us a total of 82.
82.
So 82 police shields out of 100 police shields.
I think we're going to need a countdown for the next one. We've got enough now, haven't we? 6 or 7. Is this number 6, number 7?
Or do we wait till we've got a top 10?
A top 10, yeah. Maybe wait till the top 10.
Oh, yeah, we won't be far off that. The next book we will be looking at is The Matrimonial Catastrophe of Till Death.
Yes, I remember that one, yeah.
Which I've only just read for the first time ever. So I'll be looking forward to discussing that with you, gentlemen.
I haven't read that for a long time, so I'll hopefully be able to find my copy.
Is that Corella's sister's wedding?
It is.
I can remember that one.
Oh, yeah.
So there's all sorts going on in that. So having been trapped in the squad room in this story, we move out into the world for the next one. And so, until we get round to doing that, we are going to do a bonus episode in a little bit for you to listen to us probably smelling our books again, I should imagine, as normally happens. So, until then, I will say goodbye myself, goodbye from me, and Morgan.
Fairly well.
And Steve-O.
Goodbye.
See you soon.